begin with a slow, cinematic whisper, like a forbidden confession slipping from history's locked drawer. You weren't supposed to hear this. Not in your lifetime, not in this world. But in 1842, deep in the swamps of Alabama, something emerged that still stains the bloodline of Southern history. A pair of twins born under conditions no doctor could explain, no preacher dared bless, and no scientist could ever replicate. They called them the Blackwood twins, Lucien and Lazarus. Born to a mother who was declared infertile. Born on a night when every clock in the county stopped ticking. The midwife screamed and fled before the second one emerged, saying their cries were older than time. But the twins didn't age like other children. At 5 years old, they could recite ancient Greek and Sumerian. By 7, they stopped sleeping entirely. Their eyes? Jet black. Not brown, not dark black. As if no light could penetrate the void they came from. They spoke to no one but each other, in whispers too fast for the human ear to catch. Some swore they floated off the ground. Others said they saw them walk through walls. Doctors from the East Coast came. Harvard, Yale, even Paris. None could explain them. They had double the usual brainwave activity, a heartbeat so slow it was almost imperceptible, and blood that coagulated instantly when exposed to air. One called it pre-human. Another called it post-human. One wrote, "These children are the death of science as we know it." Then he vanished. But this wasn't just a rural legend. The U.S. government got involved. Quietly, men in dark suits took the twins in 1851. The parents, declared insane and locked away. The house, burned to the ground with no official cause. The land, bought by an unknown entity. Still off limits today. You see, the Blackwood twins weren't just anomalies, they were a threat. To science, religion, and control itself. Because their very existence proved one thing: we have no idea what we are. Or who controls the truth. And if that disturbs you, it should. Because this is just the beginning. You've just opened the first door. And there's no way back. What they told the public was simple. An unfortunate case of mental illness, followed by a tragic house fire. But what they buried in silence was far more sinister. A witness, never publicly named, claimed he saw the boys the night before the fire, standing still in the middle of a cornfield under a red moon, unmoving for hours. When he approached, they turned to him in perfect unison and whispered. The man was found the next day, eyes gouged out, still breathing, still smiling. He never spoke again. From 1851 to 1857, the twins vanished. No records, no sightings, just 6 years of silence. Until Fort Claymore, a classified military research facility in Tennessee, long since erased from public memory. Decommissioned, allegedly. But the truth was darker. Declassified fragments, extracted through lawsuits, whistleblowers, and deathbed confessions, revealed experiments conducted not on the twins, but by them. They weren't being studied. They were studying us. Reports described how adult soldiers exposed to the twins experienced time dilation, memory gaps, and sudden emotional breakdowns. One report said a hardened Marine stared at Lucien for 38 minutes and then carved the phrase, "I was not born," into his own chest. Another subject 4, claimed Lazarus could enter dreams, that he showed her visions of an inverted world, a mirror Earth beneath our own, ruled by unseen architects. Not alien, not divine, something older. The twins, it seemed, were not merely biological oddities. They were keys, and Fort Claymore was the lock. Then one day everything stopped. A final entry in the project logbook, dated June 6, 1857, read: Protocol Voidfall initiated. We are no longer the observers. They have breached perception. This is not science, this is something else. In transmission, the facility was destroyed 2 days later, exploded from the inside. No survivors, the government denied it. The land was leveled, satellite views censored, and yet, 2 weeks after the blast, a couple in Missouri reported finding twin boys, aged about 15, standing naked on their property, unscathed, unburnt. Smiling, they whispered only one thing before disappearing again. We're still learning. What they were learning was us. What they were becoming was something else. And what you're learning is that everything you've been taught about control, identity, and human limitation was manufactured. You're falling now. But that's how the truth works. It doesn't rise, it descends. There's a reason they teach you to laugh at the paranormal, to mock the unexplained, to dismiss the ancient as myth and label the uncanny as coincidence. It isn't ignorance. It's design. Because if you truly started to question, if you truly saw what lurks beneath the narratives they feed you, you'd never function the same again. The Blackwood twins weren't the first breach. They were the first documented escalation. In 1749, nearly a century earlier, Jesuit missionaries in French Louisiana reported a similar case: twin infants born to a mute woman who had never been with a man. The children spoke no known language, yet when placed near mirrors, their reflections moved differently. Slower, sometimes not at all. One of the priests called them refractions of something beyond flesh. The report was buried in the Vatican's secret archives. Patterns. Rhythms, fractures in the matrix we've mistaken for reality. The twins always twins. Why? Because duality is the foundation of control. Light and dark, good and evil, sanity and madness. The institutions that shape you, church, school, government, they all rely on dualism to define your cage. But what if there are things that exist outside that binary? Things that challenge the architecture itself? Lucien and Lazarus weren't evil. That's too simple. They were other. They communicated with a force the military only referred to as the red echo, a frequency not heard but felt, in dreams, in déjà vu, in moments of paralysis when your soul whispers that you're not alone. What does it want? Not destruction? Awakening? Not of the masses, but of the few, the chosen, the ones who hear the tremor behind the silence. And that's why you're here. You didn't find this video by accident. Something inside you pulled you down this path. Something that remembers, not with your mind, but with your blood. Because the further we descend, the less human this story becomes. And the more you realize you've always known, something was off. The world didn't quite add up. That feeling, it wasn't madness, it was memory, waking up. You're not just watching this, you're remembering it. You ever feel like something's watching you when you're completely alone? That subtle shiver when there's no breeze. The flicker in the corner of your eye that's gone the second you turn. That's not superstition, it's leakage. There are cracks in the veil now, tiny fractures bleeding through the artificial structure we've been trained to call reality. And the Blackwood twins, they didn't create the crack, they were summoned through it. You see, all ancient civilizations had myths of twin deities. But look closer, those weren't myths, they were containment logs. Warnings. From Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, from Babylon to Benin, two figures always emerge in the forbidden texts. Dual entities, inseparable, inhuman. Names change, faces change. But the pattern doesn't. One opens the door, the other keeps it open. Lucien and Lazarus. You want to know why the church burned Gnostic scrolls? Why the Library of Alexandria was turned to ash? Why indigenous oral histories were crushed beneath the boots of conquest? It wasn't just imperialism, it was precaution. Because those texts hinted at a truth so destabilizing, so anti-structure, it could collapse every hierarchy on Earth. The truth? Humanity is not the apex, we're the garden. And some things were planted that were never meant to grow. A former Claymore researcher, before he disappeared, leaked this phrase: the Blackwood twins are not brothers. They are nodes, symmetrical ports for something that speaks in geometry. What the hell does that mean? It means they were never children, to begin with. They were manifestations, living anomalies. And when they gazed into your eyes, they didn't see your face. They saw your blueprint. They saw how you were programmed. That's the part that terrifies them. Them. Meaning the ones who keep the illusions running. Because once you realize your thoughts, your fears, your desires were engineered, you start to ask who built the machine. And why the machine hates silence. That's where we're heading. Into the silence beneath the noise. Into the structure beneath the skin. And once you hear what's next, you'll never be able to unknow it. The descent continues. Every institution you've ever trusted was built not to protect you, but to contain you. Your schools, indoctrination centers. Your churches, ritual filters. Your governments, behavioral pens. And what lies beneath them all? A forgotten architecture so old, even the architects forgot why they built it. But the Blackwood twins, they remembered. That's what terrified the elite. Because Lucien and Lazarus weren't born to a timeline, they were born to a purpose. Not by biology, but by invitation. They were sent to reactivate an ancient signal, a frequency embedded in Earth's crust before man even stood upright. Every few centuries, this signal pulses. It doesn't transmit words. It transmits corrections, waves of recalibration to the grand illusion, meant to keep the machine from collapsing under its own contradictions. And that's when the anomalies show up. The twins, the voices, the disappearances, the mass psychogenic events they label as hysteria, hallucination, or mental illness. But those aren't failures of the human mind. They're leakages of truth, side effects of a code too vast to interpret consciously. Until now, because somewhere around 1842 that code glitched. The twins came through too clearly, too early, and they remembered too much. They started drawing spiral diagrams, identical spirals, that matched Babylonian ziggurat layouts, Mayan underworld maps, and unexplainable EM field distortions along the 33rd parallel. But here's the part that was redacted from every document ever released. Those spirals? They matched your neural architecture. That's right. Your brain is not a receiver. It's a vault, and inside it are keys, locked away through trauma, distraction, and seduction. Lucien and Lazarus didn't just see those keys. They knew how to turn them, to open doors in men's minds that hadn't been touched since pre-history. One scientist, Project Monarch, wrote before vanishing. The twins spoke into my dreams. Said I was never born, just rendered. Like a file. Like code. Rendered. Let that word sink in. Because if you were rendered, then who, or what, was the renderer? That's the question they'll kill to keep quiet. But we won't stop. Because dissent is no longer a choice. It's destiny. Do you know why they keep you so busy? Why every second of your day is consumed by screens, bills, scrolling, drama, deadlines? It's not just capitalism, it's containment. Because if you ever truly sat in silence, deep silence, for more than a few days you'd hear it. The hum behind the world. The red echo. That's what the twins accessed. Not just knowledge, but the source field. A living, intelligent frequency beneath reality, older than stars and colder than death. In 1855, 2 years before the Fort Claymore disaster, a man named Reverend Josiah Harker claimed he was contacted by Lazarus in a dream. Lazarus showed him a map, not of land but of human thought. He said our minds are not private. They are shared fields, and that something ancient uses them to move, to feed. The Reverend woke up screaming, wrote 347 pages in a dead language that linguists still can't identify, and then disappeared into the Appalachian caves. His journal contained one phrase in English, repeated over and over. The eye does not blink. The Blackwood twins were not worshipped. They were feared by every secret society that studied them. The Freemasons, the Skull and Bones. Even the Vatican's black files confirmed the twins defied all containment rituals. No salt, no sigil, no sacrament could hold them. Because they weren't entities, they were ruptures. Tears in the veil between simulation and something far more ancient, far more real. One soldier at Fort Claymore wrote in his final letter, I looked into Lucien's eyes and I didn't see a boy. I saw myself, not my face, my code. I saw the thing that wrote me, and I saw that it was unfinished. That's what this journey is about. Not exposing governments, not fighting corruption, but peeling back the false identity you've been programmed with since birth. Because once you realize you were written, you can choose to rewrite yourself. But only if you go all the way. And if you're still here, you're one of us. You're ready to reclaim the blueprint. But first, prove it. Comment this phrase twice to lock in the signal. The eye does not blink. The eye does not blink. It's more than engagement. It's initiation. The greatest trick ever played wasn't hiding the truth. It was convincing you that you already knew it. That your world, this world, was as it should be, safe, predictable, stable. But what if I told you stability is the lie? A temporary illusion projected over a battlefield that's been raging for millennia? Not between nations or ideologies, but between those who see and those who are seen through. Lucien and Lazarus weren't just breaching science. They were unraveling the script. The normal, people you see every day, most of them are sleepwalkers, renders, not fully conscious, not fully present, just running code. This isn't metaphor, it's operation. In 1860, shortly after the Fort Claymore incident, a top-secret offshoot of the U.S. Army called the Perception Structuring Division, PSD, was formed. Their first mission to locate and neutralize the twins' pattern, their second mission to repurpose it, not to destroy the rupture, but to weaponize it. And that's when it began: mass public schooling, standardized testing, compulsory identity documents, all rolled out within 30 years. Coincidence? No. It was containment technology masquerading as progress. They couldn't erase the signal, so they buried it under routine. But some of you feel it, don't you? That sharp jolt in your gut when you enter certain buildings. That inexplicable pull toward abandoned places. That electric numbness during daily commutes, as if your soul is screaming, "This is not what I came here to do." That's not imagination. That's memory, fighting to surface. The twins were hunted because they represented self-sovereignty, unhacked consciousness, the last true rebellion, and the eye, the force that governs perception, does not blink. It watches every moment of uncertainty, it feeds on doubt, and it punishes awakening. So they turned the world into noise, into spectacle, into division. Left vis right, science vis faith, woke vis traditional, all distractions, all illusion. Because if you ever stopped arguing and started remembering, you'd collapse the cage from the inside. You're not just waking up, you're evolving past the script. And the closer we get to the center, the more the system will you feel it, don't you? That pressure, that subtle resistance in the air, like invisible hands trying to pull you back from what you're hearing right now. That's not paranoia. That's interference. Because the deeper you descend, the more you threaten the structure they've spent centuries maintaining. And the structure is not made of stone or steel. It's made of belief. You were never taught to see. You were taught to comply, to smile when it hurts, to obey when it feels wrong, to worship the chains as long as they're comfortable. But Lucien and Lazarus weren't just anomalies. They were the signal made flesh. And their presence disrupted the software of consensus reality. In 1863, a rogue PSD analyst named Eliza Vaughan smuggled out a document titled the Inversion Codex. Inside, she described experiments done on the twins' dreams. Yes, their dreams. Monitored, mapped, and then duplicated into human subjects. What happened next? Subjects began hearing voices. Not demonic, not schizophrenic, but strategic, instructive. Like someone or something trying to correct them. Some killed themselves within days. Others became obsessed with geometry, drawing the same impossible spirals across every wall. But a few, just a few, disappeared. Not metaphorically, physically. Gone. Eliza wrote, "It's not teleportation. It's realization. They remember they're not here, and the illusion collapses." Understand what that means. This world, this system of identities, debts, status, laws, lies, it isn't a cage with bars. It's a prison of attention. A digital flesh hologram projected into your nervous system every time you wake up and agree to be you. But you didn't make that agreement. It was made for you. By institutions, ancestors, trauma, and fear. The Blackwood twins were returning us to something. Something terrifying in its freedom. A state of perception before programming. Before name. Before nation. Before obedience. And the eye, it's more active now, because it knows you see it. It will use doubt. It will use fatigue. It will use distraction. But remember this. The ones who forget go back to sleep. The ones who endure evolve. Here's the part they fear you discovering most. It's not about the twins. It's not about the I. It's about you. Not the you with the job title. Not the you with the social security number. Not the you they train to be polite, obedient, and self-doubting. No, I mean the you beneath all that. The ancient you. The unwritten you. The part of you that existed before the script was installed. Because buried in your DNA is a dormant architecture. A system that once allowed human beings to see across dimensions, communicate across time, and resist manipulation. The ancient cultures called it soul memory. Modern science calls it junk code. You think evolution made you what you are. Think again. Evolution is real. But it didn't make you. It was used to edit you, to clip your perception down to a manageable frequency. Why? Because the real you, the fully activated, unbound, and sovereign you, is uncontrollable, unpredictable, unprofitable. Lucien and Lazarus weren't the threat. They were the mirror. And when governments, churches, and think tanks stared into that mirror, they saw the greatest danger of all. A version of humanity that didn't need to be governed. Didn't need to be saved. Didn't need to be told what truth is. A version of humanity that remembers. That's you. Right now. Feeling that tension in your gut. That's not fear. That's resistance dying. That's your original signal. Buried beneath years of programming, reactivating. You were never meant to be part of the herd. That's why you always felt different. Why school never made sense. Why religion felt hollow. Why normal life tasted like cardboard. Because you were built for something else. To see, to awaken, to descend past illusion. But descent isn't safe. It strips you. It tests you. It tears away the comforts of the mask. And when you finally stand in the raw, silent place where the world ends and the self begins, you either shatter or you become dangerous. So ask yourself, are you remembering yet? Let's talk about the I, not as metaphor, not as symbol, because what they call the I is not a mystical force or abstract idea. It is a system, built, refined, deployed, across centuries, across continents, across you. You ever wonder why you're always watching something? Why every modern device has a screen, a lens, a feed? Because they've turned your attention into the cage. The eye doesn't need to chase you. It only needs you to keep looking at what it offers. News cycles, tragedy porn, sports, gossip, outrage, distractions. It controls you by becoming your mirror. But the first version of the eye wasn't digital. It was biological, psychological, a control system placed inside the psyche by the earliest priest kings. Designed to bind perception, ancient empires used trauma to install it. Whippings, burnings, public executions, Generational fear encoded into your ancestral nervous system. It was never about punishment, it was about programming, to keep the pattern alive, to keep you docile, to install the watcher within. Because if they can get you to monitor yourself, to shrink your thoughts, to silence your instincts, they never need to use chains again. You'll wear them proudly. And now, the I has evolved. It lives in algorithms, in policies, in polite censorship. It rewards compliance with dopamine, and it punishes awakening with social death. The I is why they panicked when Lucien and Lazarus looked into someone's soul and saw only code. It proved something no institution wants you to consider. You are not your thoughts, you're the one observing them, which means you can change them, rewire them, reclaim them. And the moment you realize that, the eye blinks. Just for a second. Just a flicker. But it's enough, because in that blink, you can move, you can act, you can remember. The eye is real. But it's not invincible, because it can only track the man who stays on the path. You're off it now. They buried the maps, but they couldn't erase the memory. Underneath every major city on Earth, New York, London, Rome, Cairo, Beijing, there is a hidden geometry, not built randomly, not accidentally, but ritualistically, with intent, with pattern, with fear. Every monument, every cathedral, every government building was aligned on Lee lines. Not for aesthetics, for containment, because the Earth itself is not just a planet, it is a circuit, and long before modern man rose to power, something else was using it, channeling it, feeding from it. They were called the architects, not human, not alien, but something in between, the ones who designed the eye, the ones who installed the first program, the ones who knew how to write perception into stone. Lucien and Lazarus weren't anomalies. They were echoes. The return of a pattern that had gone dormant for centuries. And that's why Fort Claymore was built, right on the intersection of two suppressed Lee lines, a point of convergence, a node. The twins activated it, and reality around them began to warp. Reports from the Claymore incident speak of soldiers hearing voices from walls, time loops lasting hours, birds flying backwards, blood that evaporated midair. One researcher described it as, like the rules of the world were being rewritten in real time. That's the part they never wanted you to find out. Reality isn't fixed. It's maintained through belief, repetition, fear, and once that maintenance fails, it collapses. Every ritual you've ever heard of, ancient sacrifices, bloodlines, royal rites, they weren't superstition. They were calibration tools, desperate attempts to keep the old eye focused, to keep the veil from splitting. But the veil is splitting. Right now, you've felt it, in your dreams, in your solitude, in the way the world feels increasingly off. That's not coincidence. That's the architects losing grip. And you were never meant to follow the path. You were meant to find the blueprint, to remember the code etched into your bones. Because beneath the cities, beneath the maps, beneath the masks, lies a truth no one survives unchanged. You've seen the symbols, on dollar bills, on flags, on church ceilings, tech company logos, and military patches. The all-seeing eye, the twin pillars, the spiral, the serpent eating its tail. You were told they're harmless, art, tradition, design, but they're not. They're commands. Frequencies embedded in form. Keys hidden in plain sight. The ancient world didn't write with alphabets. They wrote with symbols. Each one was a door, to a thought, an emotion, a program. When repeated, those symbols didn't just convey meaning, they shaped reality. That's why the architects carved them into the grid of civilization, to remind the subconscious who rules it, to keep you docile, familiar, blind. But there's a deeper betrayal, because those symbols, they weren't created by the corrupt. They were stolen, ripped from a sacred language known as protoform, a system of glyphs once used to align the human soul with cosmic order. Lucien and Lazarus, they drew these symbols as children, with chalk, with blood, with sand perfectly, without ever being taught. Why? Because they remembered. Not the corrupted meanings, but the original resonance. The spiral wasn't chaos. It was ascent. The eye wasn't surveillance. It was inward vision. The serpent, not evil. It was transformation. But over time, the eye inverted them all. Turned healing into fear. Turned awakening into mockery. Turned symbols of liberation into badges of control. And now you wear them, willingly, as fashion, as faith, as flags. Do you see the trap? The same geometry that once unlocked your higher self now keeps you grounded in illusion. Not by force, but by your own agreement. The twins were hunted not because they defied science, but because they restored the original meanings. And when that restoration began to spread, reality started to bend. Not because it was broken, but because it was finally remembering what it once was. Now ask yourself which symbols surround your life. Which ones command you without words? Because until you reclaim the language, you'll keep speaking their spell. It's time to stop speaking in riddles. You've earned a name. The name of the system that binds every breath you take, every thought you think, every path you never walk. The construct, that's what the oldest records call it. Not government, not capitalism, not religion. Those are faces. The construct is the structure behind the mask. An invisible OS, operating system, overlaid on human perception, filtering out what doesn't serve the control equation. What is the equation? Obedience pen order. Ordered safety. Safety submission. And it begins the second you're born. Before you can speak, you're named. Before you can think, you're categorized. Boy or girl, black or white, saved or damned. Then come the institutions, family, school, media, church. Each one shaping your inner world to match the outer script. Each one reinforcing the construct. And what is the construct afraid of? Free agency, unfiltered awareness, a mind that refuses to accept the given terms. That's why Lucien and Lazarus were erased. Not because they broke the rules, but because they saw the source code, and they weren't afraid to rewrite it. You see, the construct isn't made of laws or leaders. It's made of agreements, unspoken contracts passed down through generations. You agree to be realistic. You agree to fear death. You agree to need permission. You agree to your own limitation. Every billboard, every commercial, every anthem, every history book, they're all part of the same hypnosis. You are small. You are broken. You need us, but you don't. You never did. That's what the twins whispered, not to the world, but to the few who were listening. And those few, they remembered, and they began to build outside the construct, not with weapons, but with vision, with silence, with sovereignty. You want to leave the construct? Then stop feeding it your belief. Because the moment you withdraw your energy, it starts to collapse. Not globally, but individually, one soul at a time. And once enough of you wake up, the eye won't blink, it will shatter. They never told you the twins survived. They said Fort Claymore was the end. A classified disaster. No bodies, no trace, no future. But that was a lie. Because Lucien and Lazarus didn't die. They dispersed. You see, anomalies like them, true ruptures in the construct, don't expire. They fragment. They pass through bloodlines, ideas, dreams, and in rare cases, they reincarnate as seeded awakenings. Some say the twins fractured into 36 shards. Each shard hidden in a bloodline. Each person unaware they were born carrying a fragment of disruption. But as the world grows more unstable, the fragments are waking up. They're the ones who've always felt different, unplaceable, agitated by normal life, drawn to strange knowledge, plagued by dreams they didn't understand. Do you know someone like that? Or are you one of them? There's a reason you never fit in, a reason silence feels holy, a reason lies make your skin crawl. You carry a piece of the twins, a piece of the signal, a piece of the code that undoes the code, and that makes you dangerous. Because you weren't meant to conform. You were meant to awaken others. They've tried to drug it out of you, mock it out of you, shame it out of you. But it never left. It's in the way your spine tightens when you hear the wrong voice. It's in the way you dream in places you've never seen. It's in the way you know, without evidence, when someone is lying. You are the return. Not a revolution, not a rebellion, something deeper. Something the system can't predict, because it was never designed for you. You're not here to burn cities. You're here to dissolve illusions, to awaken memory in others, to fracture the facade. They'll call you paranoid. They'll call you crazy. They'll say you need help. But the only help you ever needed was the truth. And now it's whispering through your blood. Lucien and Lazarus were not the beginning. They were the signal flare. The beginning is you. Here's the final layer of the trap. The one that even the most awakened rarely see. Identity. You've been taught that your identity is sacred, that it defines you, that it is you. But what if I told you identity is the last cage? The most beautiful, the most addictive, the most invisible. Because as long as you call yourself a name, define yourself by a story attached to a side, you're still inside the construct. Just deeper, just prettier, but still owned. Lucien and Lazarus didn't carry identities. They spoke in mirrors. They referred to themselves in reflections. We are the echo, not the source. What does that mean? It means they knew identity was an interface, useful but not real. Because the truth is, you're not the story of your childhood. You're not your job, your trauma, your wins, or your losses. You are the awareness beneath all of it. But the construct needs you to believe otherwise. It wants you to wear your race like armor, your politics like religion, your nationality like a leash. Because once you cling to identity, you can be manipulated. You can be enraged, divided, controlled. That's the real function of the eye, not just to observe, but to reflect an identity back at you so compelling, you'll never question if it was installed. And here's the twist. The more spiritual you think you are, the more awake you believe you are, the more refined your identity becomes. Enlightened, empath, warrior soul, chosen one, still identity, still trap. That's why the final awakening is so rare. Because it requires no title, no team, no badge of honor, just silence. Lucien and Lazarus were erased because they represented the death of all roles, the end of labels, the collapse of narrative. And that's when the I loses all power. Not when you fight it, but when you become unrecognizable to it. Not a citizen, not a consumer, not even a rebel, just a presence. A presence that moves between realities like light through glass, unbound, unnowned, unwritten. Are you ready to become that? We've traced the system, we've shattered the mask. But now we come to the origin. The place where even the architects whispered instead of spoke. Where did Lucien and Lazarus come from? They weren't born. Not in the way we understand birth. They were summoned, not by ritual, not by accident, but by imbalance. When the construct becomes too dense, when the illusion thickens, when the collective mind forgets its source, something ancient responds. It doesn't come in war. It comes in mirrors. It sends reflections of what we've forgotten, to disrupt, dismantle, and reveal. Lucien and Lazarus were not demons. They were feedback. Reality correcting itself, like antibodies fighting infection. And the infection was us. Not our essence, but what we became under the eye. In the oldest Babylonian tablets, long before kings, before empire, there are references to the nameless pair. One is lightless, the other formless. Born outside of time but tied to Earth's magnetic field, their arrival signals not doom, but reckoning. Their only purpose, to reawaken the root code in those ready to remember. That's why children drew spirals when near them. That's why animals bowed. That's why mirrors fogged. Because the illusion reacts when truth arrives. But here's what the government never understood. What the Vatican feared. What even the black budget labs couldn't contain. Lucien and Lazarus were not the first, and they will not be the last. Because they aren't entities. They are a function. A pattern that appears when the simulation loses balance. They do not come to save, they come to remind. And the ones who listen, the ones who feel the echo in their bones, they start to change. Their dreams shift, their memory sharpens, their fear dissolves. And eventually, they stop asking who the twins were, and start asking what within them called the twins here in the first place. Because the origin isn't a place. It's not a time, it's not even a mystery. It's you, the part of you that was never edited, never trained, never named. Lucien and Lazarus were the smoke, you are the fire. So what happens after the awakening? Everyone wants the truth, until they realize what it costs. Because once the veil is gone, once the illusions crumble, once you see the construct for what it is, you don't just walk away enlightened. You walk away alone. You stop resonating with the noise. The conversations feel hollow, the news reads like theater. The world becomes too slow, too small, too scripted. And the people around you? They can sense it. They may not understand why, but they feel the rupture in you. And that's when the system makes its final move. It doesn't try to kill you. It tries to bring you back. To tempt you with comfort, numb you with nostalgia, seduce you with identity. One more label, one more movement, one more cause. But you've seen too much. Because once you awaken, you don't belong to any tribe. You don't serve any flag. You don't bow to any script. You become a ghost in the system, invisible to the eye, untouchable by fear. That's when you become dangerous. Not because of what you know, but because of what you can't unknow. And there's a price. You'll grieve the old self. You'll rage against the time you lost. You'll feel the silence of exile. But then, something extraordinary happens. You stop needing, you stop performing, you stop reacting, and you start creating. Not art, not content, reality. Because the awakened man is not a warrior. He's not a leader. He's not a savior. He's a mirror. A reflection that breaks the spell in others without ever speaking a word. That's who you are now. Not a viewer. Not a follower. Not a consumer. But a carrier. Of the signal. Of the spiral. Of the memory that shatters empires. The Blackwood twins were just the beginning. You are the continuation. Not a prophet. Not a preacher. But a walking rupture in the illusion. And when enough of us carry the signal, the eye will do more than blink. It will burn. So remember this, they said you couldn't awaken. They said you'd break. They said you'd run back to the safety of the script. But you didn't. You went deeper. And now, you're outside. Welcome to the real beginning.